January saw a lot of activity at our southern border with over 150,000 apprehensions and almost 50,000 reportedly getting away during the month. And for more on the situation at the border, I want to bring in our border correspondent, Jason Jones. Jason, tell us a little bit about what's happening there.
Yeah, these numbers are just stunning coming out from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. These preliminary numbers really indicate to us what we're looking at in fiscal year 22 that's going to be impacting this country. When you're talking about 152,000 apprehensions for just the month of January, and you look back, though, to the month of January last year in the worst border crisis we had in American history, we were only at 78,000 apprehensions this time last year. So it really tells us how bad the situation is right now. But here's the thing. October, November, December, and January, fiscal year 22, we now sit at 670,000. So this is where the concern is coming from, and rightly so. Now, take all of that into consideration and then look at the fentanyl crisis we have directly linked to this border and the cartels, along with the methamphetamine issue and the overdose deaths, and you see why people are so frustrated.
Jason, what do you think is fueling these numbers, given the fact that we have seen the Biden administration reinstate some of those Trump-era policies?
It's perception. This is the core problem when we talk about immigration specifically. You know, the perception to the world has gone out that if you come to the United States, you will be able to make it. And not only that, you're going to be able to stay. And this is why we're seeing a significant increase in the number of apprehensions. But I've got to tell you, that's just one part of it. We've got to remember that it's not a U.S.-Mexico issue anymore. The world is now coming here, and we see it as over 150 different countries with people who are apprehended as their countries of origin who came in last year. So, you know, at this rate, if this continues, we'll be around 2 million apprehensions in fiscal year 22. And that's just one side of it. You know, never mind the national security side, the world on terrorism. We're still in that. We can't forget that. And then we've got these overdose, which for me, I got to tell you, I'm really concerned about.
Jason, you were speaking a little bit about the fentanyl crisis, and obviously that's been a huge problem down at the border. I was wearing my congressional hat during the week as a congressional correspondent, and I was following the House GOP leadership giving a press conference and how they were trying to extend the designation, the fentanyl designation of it being a Schedule I drug in order for CBP officials to be able to seize it at the border. They want to make that permanent, but they've been getting pushback from Democratic lawmakers on this. How important is that? They're calling it the Halt Fentanyl Act. How important is that in controlling the drugs coming across the southern border?
Anything that is going to increase the penalties on fentanyl is a good thing. Yeah, but I have to tell you, it's a tactic. It's a very myopic core problem to try to solve when we look at the scope and the totality of the amount of fentanyl coming in. I've said this from the start. These fentanyl labs, these pill mills in Mexico, they're able to produce millions of pills. The methamphetamine that CJ&G and Sinaloa Cartel are producing, these mega labs can produce anywhere from 3 to 5 tons of methamphetamine a week. So the problem is this. It's not about law enforcement being able to seize our way out of this. What it's about is we're going to have to go in there and take out these labs working with the country of Mexico. We're not going to be able to seize our way out of this. Our system moves too slow by design, and we want it that way domestically. But we have to look at the animal of what's happening with these cartels in Mexico and the scope of these labs. There's just too many of them, and they're too big, producing too much of this poison.
Jason, I think I've shared with you previously that I've been down and covered the border myself sort of in the last couple years. And obviously, one of the big aspects of this is the cartels are loving this. This is big business for the cartels. I mean, when you take into account the money that they're making on the drug trade, and then also the number of people that they pay per head to come across the border. It's obviously they charge less to Central Americans coming from different countries, but depending on where what country you're coming from, they can charge anywhere between $1,500 to $20,000 per person. Talk to me a little bit about how this is fueling the cartels and sort of the big business that this is.
It's massive business. And it's part, and I mean, you're nailing it what you're saying right now. It's part of the real transition of what we've seen. You know, historically going back, what we were dealing with at that border was human smuggling, right? That's where you pay a person to move from point A to point B, and it's voluntary. Now what we're seeing is trafficking through debt bondage. This is human trafficking we're seeing now. So much that the cartels are so emboldened, they're literally putting wristbands on men, women, and children. I mean, I've seen those wristbands on a 23-day-old child down there. They're so emboldened by this. And then now these people are being led into our country, and yet they're going to be here, yet indebted to a criminal organization in a foreign country who really, by the way, should be a terrorist organization for what they're doing. And I'll say this because I think one of the things you talked about, legislation earlier, it's a key point here. These cartels are too big in scope. Law enforcement has thrown everything we have in our toolbox at them, and I help build programs to go after them. And I will tell you, if we're going to be successful here, we're going to have to designate them as foreign terrorist organizations. That's one of the key tenets to winning on what we're dealing with right now.
Jason, here's one thing that the Ukraine crisis and the border crisis have in common. Kamala Harris, the vice president, has been sent to secure that border. I just want to get your reaction to that, given the fact that she was appointed the border czar by the Biden administration, and yet we've seen very little of her addressing those issues at the border.
Leadership matters. And as Americans all over the country, we're seeing this really play out right now. I don't know how you cannot take this border issue and what's happening with these cartels seriously when we have lost 101,000 of our citizens. We throw out these numbers now as big as they are. But I've been that guy as a law enforcement officer that goes to a family's door, knocks on it, and it lets them know that the person they love most in the world is never. And I can only imagine the pain that they're feeling when this issue is not being addressed, when fentanyl has been weaponized into a poison. We can clearly see an arc of overdoses that have just skyrocketed. So when you talk about, leadership and why we're not addressing these issues, the politics have gotten out of control. We're losing Americans, and we're not developing policies, processes, and focus to go after the real problem. And we've got to do it. And I'll be very, very frank. We've got to move with a sense of urgency on it.
Yeah. Jason, in terms of what sort of the Republican ideas may be for this, I mean, you talked about the messaging problem, and I agree with you completely there, because when you're down at the border and when you speak to migrants, they have a sense of hope that they will be allowed into the country under President Biden. And the cartels exploit this information with their information campaigns when they go and they specifically target migrant groups and caravans coming into the country, right? Which is why we see a lot of these large numbers coming in. I mean, how sophisticated is the cartel disinformation campaign when it comes to inspiring migrants to leave their home countries and to cross the border?
Well, they're very advanced. They have entire propaganda wings that handle their entire social media side. And they use part of that to entice migrants from all over the world that if you come, we're going to help get you into the United States. And I can tell you story after story of being down there talking with some of these folks who tell you what they're being told. I'll give you a great example. When I'm in Roma, Texas, Miguel Alemán, just on the other side, that is one of the most violent regions along the entire southwest border. And every night, as I showed you guys just a week and a half ago when I was down there, we had 200 families of men, women, and children in one bend in the river cross. But when you're down there, I'll ask them, why are you here? Why are you crossing in the most violent region along the southwest border? And they look at me and they say, well, this is what we were told we had to do. This is where we had to come. And this is the process we had to go through and then make the payment of what they call the piso, or the tax. And it's really something the way they go through this. And I don't know how much time we have left, but they literally pass these people off from stash house to stash house before they make it into the U.S.
Yeah. Jason Jones, it's just remarkable always to get your perspective from the border and covering all the different components of this. We really appreciate you spending a part of your Saturday with us. Thanks for that.
Thanks for having me. Good to be with you.